Welcome back to BeYoungMinistry.blogspot.com to another blog and another podcast. Today we are in Luke chapter 19, verses 45 through 48, which reads, "He went into the temple and began to throw out the traders. 'It's written,' he said, 'my house shall be a house of prayer, but you've made it a brigand's house,' or brigand's cave, pardon me. He was teaching every day in the temple, but the chief priests, the scribes, and the leading men of the people were trying to destroy him. They couldn't find any way to do it because all the people were hanging on his every word." That's Luke chapter 19, verses 45 through 48. It was Tuesday, the day after the Lord Jesus entered Jerusalem on the donkey, and it was Passover week. He lodged in Bethany that night and came into the city early the next morning. According to Mark, on his way to the temple, he cursed the fig tree. That particular tree draws his attention because it had a full covering of leaves and it should have already bore figs. This was an object lesson of Israel's rejection of the truth and the results. When he arrived at the temple, he entered the court of the Gentiles, which was the only place in the temple that was accessible to the Gentiles. There, the Jews could witness to the Gentiles about the one true and living God. Instead of sharing their faith, they used the area for a religious marketplace where Jews from other lands could exchange money and purchase overpriced, approved animals for the sacrifices. The priests managed this business and made a great profit from it. In verse 45, we read, "He went into the temple and began to throw out the traders." This is the second time the Lord Jesus went into the temple to confront religion. The Jews hoped that he would overthrow Pilate and his Roman army. But he didn't confront the pagan Romans. He confronted Judaism, the soul of the Israeli nation. The Jews didn't understand that their greatest enemy was themselves and their lust for this world's profit. The ministry of the Lord Jesus has always been focused on the heart of man. It is always focused on that which concerns our relationship with Him. He is concerned about true worship of the true God in the true manner, not impacted by politics or other earthly matters. When the Lord Jesus entered the court of the Gentiles, it was clear that it had been turned into a commerce center. The priests were selling animals for the needed sacrifices, and the prices were jacked up. Thus, the people were being gouged by the high prices. In verse 46, we read, "It is written," he said, "my house shall be a house of prayer, but you've made it into a thieves' den," or a thieves' cave. The temple was always designed by God to be a place of prayer, worship, devotion, confession, and praise. The religious had turned it into a circus of blasphemy and greed. In verse 47, we read, "He was teaching every day in the temple. But the chief priests, the scribes, and the leading men of the people were trying to destroy him." According to Luke chapter 20 and verse 1, the Lord Jesus was teaching the gospel. He was teaching about sin, forgiveness, and a personal relationship with God. In Matthew's gospel, we learn that he was also healing the blind and the lame. On the other hand, the religious leaders were in a rage, losing all control. And so they were out to destroy the Lord Jesus. Their rage had become so great that they were pregnant with the idea of killing the Lord Jesus. They wanted him dead more than ever. What a contrast between the Lord and the flesh of the religious leaders. In verse 48, we read, they couldn't find any way to do it because all the people were hanging on his every word. The people were so glued in, I should say clued in, on the teachings of the Lord Jesus. The religious leaders could not find a way to kill him. Sadly, in a few days, the crowd decreased, and those who were left were found screaming for the death of the Lord Jesus. After his resurrection, only 120 believers were in Judea gathered, and 500 gathered in Galilee. He's rejected in order to fulfill God's purpose. God has proven he is sovereign, and we can trust him with our lives. It is true that all things work together for our good when we let him have his way in our lives. All things are not good. It would be mockery to say that the death of a child is good. In the chemistry of the cross, God takes things that in and of themselves are bad, and he puts them together, much as a chemist might take chemicals that in and of themselves may create danger and mixes them to make a medicine that brings healing. In fact, when we mix sodium and chloride, we get table salt. By itself, sodium is a deadly poison, and so is chloride. Salt flavors food, and a certain amount of salt is necessary for human health and life. When God puts things together in the crucible of his wisdom and love, we end up as victors and benefactors. He works all things together for good, and he gives us the wonderful promise that he will always do so. We simply must trust him. My friends, I trust this podcast and this blog are useful to you in your walk with the Lord. If I can be of further assistance to you, shoot me an email at beyoungministry@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.